This week's episode was brought to you by the dedicated support of listeners just like you. And it's with your dedicated support that our community of ontological soldier rabbits keep penetrating into the front lines, treading tumultuous tautologies and tangling with theological terrors every week. If you'd like to help support our shell-shocked Baphomet Bunny Battalion or just hear the classified edition of this episode, then please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly contribution of just $5 will not only get you the top secret extended edition of this episode, where your monthly contribution of just $5 will not only get you the top secret extended edition of this episode, you'll get access to our entire archive of unaltered transmissions in their extended format, which integrates with your Spotify app after your credentials have been verified with our Patreon database. If that were not enough, to benefit your operations in the field, you'll also be given access to our digital Discord bunker of reality saboteurs, along with a 5x5 high-quality vinyl sticker of our podcast insignia, which is used to communicate covertly with other agents in the field. If you'd like to support our ongoing operations to establish outer heaven, we ask only that you share this episode with a comrade or fellow ontological battle buddy, or on your social media platform of choice. By helping expand our source of propaganda and aiding in recruiting efforts, you help the whole rabbit reach its goal of overthrowing the vulgar governments of the world and establishing a rabbit military utopia where we can initiate our journey into space, both inner and outer, forever. In this week's episode, we stack up behind Heka Astra, who's leading the charge and authoring this three-part series through the twisted jungle of Rudolph Steiner's wild mind as he establishes philosophical framework, proving the truth we feel inside, that we, despite some compelling evidence otherwise, are in fact truly free beings, possessed of our own divine will, as it is laid out in exhausting detail in his seminal classic, The Philosophy of Freedom. In part 2 of our tour of Steiner's work, we explore the shortcomings of naive realism and critical idealism, which are easier to understand than it first sounds. In the extended episode, we discuss how the faculty of feeling corresponds to traditional Hermetic elemental associations, the nature of individuality, the limits of knowledge, and the awesome power of the all-mind or Nous. Make sure to tune in next week to see how it all combines to create a uniquely free spirit. Thank you, and enjoy the show. You know, I had a German philosophy joke. I just don't think you'll get it.
Is it because it's niche?
Yeah, so much so you wouldn't get it. You're ruining the joke. You know, as long as we're talking about the philosophy of freedom, I thought it'd be worth mentioning that there technically is freedom of speech in North Korea.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's freedom after the speech. That's the problem.
Uh-oh.
That's bad. That's so bad. I shouldn't laugh at that. That's bad.
You know, I was thinking about it, and, you know, the date that a prisoner is scheduled to be free again, that should be called his period.
Why?
Because it's the end of his sentence. You know, lawyers are saying during the next quarantine that gyms have to remain open.
Oh?
Yeah, apparently, the Constitution guarantees freedom of the press. That's like the worst joke I've ever told. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Whole Rabbit, where we don't just prove the existence of a bunch of soul-swilling people, the harvesting band of transtemporal machine elves responsible for maintaining the existence of the material universe and created us as a form of cosmic horror sitcom for their twisted entertainment. Nay, we light the gas lamp in our secret bunker, pass around plates of pumpkin pie, and explore through philosophical conversation the limits of our perception, the power of thought, and whether or not freedom is the truth, a mere delusion, or the very essence of our being. Because this week, we're continuing into part 2 of our review of Rudolph Steiner's Philosophy of Freedom, beginning in chapter 5 and moving through chapter 9? 10. I'm your host, Luke Madrid, also known as Hack Rabbit. I'm joined this week by the Marquis of the Dog, Marisama.
Bonjour, all you bunnies.
And the sparkle pony navigator of the mind mystique, Heka Astra.
Hello, I'm a unicorn, and we're gonna keep thinking about thinking.
Oh, you thought so hard that you grew a horn out of your forehead.
In our last episode, we left off by finishing chapter 1 through 4, which dealt with fundamental issues of the will. Can you want what you don't want, for instance? Epistemology, the limits of how much we can know, and where the complementary phenomena of perception and thought factor in as we begin to approach at depth what it means to be free, or if such a thing is even truly possible. An issue which, for Steiner, rests fundamentally at the center of what it means to be human. We spent a considerable amount of time thinking about how one cannot think about what one is thinking about while still thinking about it, and that we have to first stop thinking about it to think about it. And then we're no longer thinking about what we're thinking about, but we're thinking about what we were thinking about. But we also discussed how our often overlooked faculty of thought is the very thing which gives rise to concepts and ideas about the world, which, it almost goes without saying, helps us make sense of the world and gives actual meaning to us about it. Kind of a big deal. In chapter 5, Steiner continues his exploration of the epistemological issues of what it means to think, how it relates to the act of perception, and where everything lies on the spectrum between subjective and objective, at least in terms of experience. Can we ever really know anything? And if so, what? To begin getting some answers, it would benefit us to summarize some of the $10 phrases used to classify what it is we're talking about, because chapter 5 is one of the more voluminous chapters in the text, and it branches off into a bunch of things that will be explained again and again. This is where Steiner starts flinging out the isms. I think the first one we should talk about: critical idealism. What is that?
It's one way of determining the nature of reality.
Specifically on loan from the German philosopher Immanuel Kant.
According to critical idealism, your reality is thought of as purely based in the mental realm, where reality is solely created through one's personal knowledge and understanding.
You can't ever really know what is outside of you, only what your brain tells you on the inside, basically.
Most importantly, critical idealism occurs through the active engagement of the individual with the world. Idealism is a philosophical term for a view that describes reality as being fundamentally mental, but with the added description of being critical. In this, critical idealism depicts the individual through their thinking and perceiving as not just a passive observer of the world, but an active one, which is still fundamentally limited in their critical examination of the world.
Meaning, you can get a better understanding of what your perceptions show you, but you can never really know what's out there.
And that's due to the limits of the human psyche and structure. So basically, our experiences are shaped by the structures of our mental realm, but we can never truly or directly know whatever exists as separate from ourselves due to this nature of existence and perception.
Okay, I think I get it. It's critical because you're suspicious whether it's true or not, and it's ideal because it's inside your mind. I get it. Mari, you're now reading the black parts because Heka said so.
Yes, ma'am.
Can we do the quote and end quote?
Yes, ma'am.
Ooh, thank you.
Steiner says, quote, "The truth of critical idealism is one thing, the force of its proof another. How it stands with the former will appear later on in the course of this book, but the force of its proof is exactly nil. If one builds a house and the ground floor collapses while the first floor is being built, then the first floor collapses also. Naive realism and critical idealism are related as ground floor to the first floor in this simile."
To clarify, Steiner is saying that Immanuel Kant's view that we can only know our subjective impressions, critical idealism, is rooted in naive realism, which Steiner says is also bunk as a standalone perspective. So what the heck is naive realism?
It's the idea that we see the world as it is. It posits that our perceptions are, in essence, a function of ourselves that simply takes in the unmediated reflections of the external world. Our experiences are just a product of our existence in reality, where we experience things as they are in a direct fashion, without subjective filters or networks of personalized processes.
What you see is what you get.
WYSIWYG.
Yep. So what Steiner is saying here is that both philosophies, naive realism, which is impersonal, and critical idealism, which is personal, are equally groundless and lacking in personal truth if that truth is not founded through personal connections at the ground level.
Which Steiner assumes does exist, that there is a ground level.
Yes. And he's saying that the force of proof relies on the individual truth, which is grounded in one's connection to reality. So, in other words, realism is still needed as the ground floor in order to find the connection to truth. He's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to how these two philosophies still play their part. This personal connection then translates to creation of knowledge and understanding, which may exist on a deeper, more holistic level beyond these two polar philosophical perspectives.
So he's not throwing out critical idealism or naive realism. He's just saying, like, they don't stand up by themselves or even together. There needs to be something more.
Yeah, and the one relies on the other, and without that one, it all collapses.
But there has to be some personal relation to both of those things, kind of like nails and glue to hold the two different materials together to build the first floor. Like, you're going to need glass and wood to build stuff, but you also have to tie them together.
So you need naive realism, which is the grounded connection to the external reality, in order for critical idealism to be built on top of it, which is a mental reflection.
You need impressions from the outside to be suspicious of inside. That makes sense. Okay, fine.
You need your physical body in order to experience and have thoughts about it.
Which you can then be skeptical of.
Yeah, sure. Over and over again.
Because we're being critical. Because we're being critical about our ideals.
Yes. So he continues, quote, "The critical idealist can, however, go even further and say, I am confined to the world of my mental pictures and cannot escape from it. If I think of a thing as being behind my mental picture, then thought is again nothing but a mental picture. An idealist of this type will either deny the thing in itself entirely, or at any rate assert that it has no significance for human beings. In other words, as good as non-existent since we can know nothing of it," unquote.
This is why he calls it groundless, regarding its force of proof as well.
I mean, it does sound solipsistic, which we intuitively detect is probably wrong. But I mean, it's true. There's no way to really get outside your own skull or outside your own subjective experience. You're locked inside a room forever. That's what it's saying. And that is a pretty easy argument to make. Frankly, I have high school trauma from contending with this exact philosophical perspective used as a cheap attack against me in an argument about foreign policy. They assign you if you're proponent or opponent, and they assigned me to be proponent to argue that the United States should take steps towards disarming North Korea. And instead of arguing the geopolitical sanity of that, like the opposing force, instead of them arguing like, no, we shouldn't for these reasons, their argument rested upon critical idealism, which was, how do you know North Korea has nukes? In fact, how do you know that you have a brain? Have you ever seen it? And I was like, that's not how this works. But the judge disagreed. And as you could tell, I'm still traumatized from it.
Aw, debate class trauma.
I was running to debate foreign policy, not Rudolph Steiner's epistemological potholes. Damn it. Anyway.
Yeah, but have you ever been there, Luke?
Quote, "The critical idealist then comes to the conclusion that all reality resolves itself into a wonderful dream, without a life which is dreamed about, and without a spirit which is having the dream, into a dream which hangs together in a dream of itself," unquote.
So I'm a loser, having a dream of losing forever. Unsure if I have a brain or if I even exist. It's just, no!
In a nutshell,
Life is but a dream, sweetheart.
is critical idealism, which has run its course. Equally groundless when it runs its course is naive realism. If we continue to follow critical idealism through to a further progressed version of it, we land on an extreme where the immediate life is immaterial and nothing is more than a dream. Alternatively, with naive realism followed through to an extreme, the mental picture has no meaningful connection to the object of observation, aside from the basic ability to observe it. In essence, the subject observer and their experience has no connection to the observed object, and the result is very much the same. So in that case, the knowledge is limited to the investigation of things as they remain separate from us.
Like in science.
Then Steiner at this point refers to two theories: absolute illusionism, which is the philosophical view that consciousness as a phenomenon is itself an illusion, and that the subjective experience and its many facets of perception is not only illusionary, but also mistaken and ultimately not real. This is like simulation theory, but when people run really hard with it.
It's a little bit like Descartes, how you can't really be sure that you're not in the imagination of an evil wizard.
Why is it doing what it's doing? Get it out of my face.
Can't really be sure that you're not in the Matrix, that kind of a thing.
Yep. The second theory that Steiner brings up is transcendental realism. So this is like the scientific question of the tree falling in the forest, regardless of whether there's an observation of it. This philosophical view of reality is that the whole of it actually exists regardless of our experiencing it. So reality is real. We can study it thoroughly from a scientific approach, and this includes anything that we can't observe directly.
So this sounds like what mainstream science believes, or what mainstream culture believes in general today, I would assume.
Yes. Yeah, this is like clinical scientific reality.
Because that's what we're told in school. You have something you're observing, you have all these different instruments. And of course, if you look at something in one band of light, like infrared versus X-ray, it's going to look different. And the way we are taught is that there is an objective reality. It's just there's so many different ways to interpret it. None of those are objectively real, but we can get a better understanding by looking at them or studying them.
So this would be like magnetism, infrasound, ultrasound, things that we can't observe directly, but can be studied and explained scientifically, whether that's through different instruments or math.
Science.
Science, Lamau.
I heckin' love science. Both these points of views have this in common with naive realism, that they seek to gain a footing in the world by means of an investigation of perceptions. Within this sphere, however, they are unable to find a firm foundation. There is, in fact, something which is related to mere perceiving in the way that our waking experience is related to our dreaming. This something is thinking, unquote.
Yeah, this is like where in physics you're like, okay, where's the objective perspective from? Well, it turns out there is none. Like, there's no ground. There's no objective thing. You can't actually remove thinking. Even if you have an instrument do your reading for you, the instrument is still doing thinking, and then you have to observe the instrument at some point. There's no way to filter it out.
Correct.
All right, now this next thing becomes vitally important for understanding what Steiner's talking about, and he's going to use it over and over. There's this transaction between perceiving and thinking. We're going to hear this over and over. We're going to ask, what is a percept? Because we're going to hear this term a lot. And what then is a concept?
Yeah, I really like how he breaks it down into these, he kind of objectifies them into these like little quanta. So I was kind of researching this a little bit, and apparently percepts are the pure sensory intake delivered to us by our sensory organs.
This includes sight, but is not limited to just your vision, which is how many people think of perception if they aren't equating it outright to interpretation. The term percepts indicates all five senses.
Now, I'd like to butt in because this to me sounds a tiny bit misleading. So while you're accurate to say our five sense organs or whatever feed our percepts, so does our mind's eye. And internally, our feelings are percepts as well. Anything that we can experience subjectively, or it's a percept.
Yeah, neurons firing.
Right, but it doesn't get translated to that mind's eye, though, without thinking. So we're talking pre-thinking.
Right, as if you're just taking everything in with no filter, like a baby would.
Yeah, you know, he gets into the nitty-gritty of it. It's like our sense organs take in the stuff, and then our soul, he says, assembles it, and then it can become an object of our thinking, which is then a percept. So yeah, long story short, yeah.
Right. I don't think it's misleading at all, though, because we have no concept applied yet. So when percepts are being invoked on their own, we are simply talking data input, pre-mental imagery.
Yeah. So like these perceptions are seemingly unrelated and unconnected to each other without context. This is without thinking.
Yeah.
A set of perceptions or precepts is simply a half-baked rendering of reality, is what Steiner says. That this is the first step of knowledge. And like I mentioned mentioned before, babies have a pure experience of the world. They are not thinking at this point. So they get a full, basically, feed of stuff going on. They don't have the same reactions and emotions and thoughts about things that we do. I mean, and you can also get to the state, if you do psychedelics, sometimes you'll get to that state where you're just taking in information and there's nothing going on. Like there's pure stillness and bliss, right? But you notice that you're not thinking, you're just purely experiencing.
I had an acid trip once that reminds me a lot of what you're saying. The person whose place I was at said that the chain fell off in their toilet. And I was like, well, I'll fix this. The acid hasn't kicked in yet. And it kicked in like really hard right as I put my hand into the water. And that's the only thing that existed was the weirdness of the water on like that interaction. So it's kind of like that, where there's no application of any kind of meaning to it or thought to it or context. It's just this like weird experience with no connection.
Like meditation practices, a lot of will describe it as bliss, but it's where you're just in the moment. You're in the now. You're not thinking about anything. You're just letting sensations come and go.
It's like if you walked into a room and you felt icky, that would be a percept. Like that.
Well, yeah, but emotions are something else.
Steiner doesn't relate emotions specifically to percepts. He relates them to intuition.
It's an intuitive reaction to the sensory input. What is a concept? So concepts are what's formed when precepts are supplemented by the process of thinking. This ascribes context, value, and meaning to the precepts that we take in at the base sensory level. So combining your precepts or your perceptions with creates a concept or a real nature of a physical object or experience. He refers to it as the second step of knowledge. The combination of perception and thinking is what allows us to make sense of the physical world, relate objects and ideas together, and obtain real knowledge. Thinking helps us relate our direct sensory experiences into tangible abstractions and concepts that can be articulated through language and shared in a meaningful way to others, be it a memory you have as an infant or while you're tripping balls again. Like if you have that experience, that pure precept, the concept is what allows you to talk about it to somebody else or like explain what happened.
It's like a whole field of interrelated ideas.
Correct.
Concepts add context to your percept.
And meaning in a personal connection to it, like a personal experience. He stresses the fact that all of our concepts are extremely personal. Like you cannot separate it from the soul and the person, like the ego.
Mm-hmm.
And so by proxy, like your concept of something is always going to be different than mine. There's no equating them. Like you see red differently than I do, like we talked about last episode. But it's still red. Like our concept is like we can relate the concept to the same thing, but we may have different experiences. So Steiner continues on, quote, "The naive man cannot be charged with the lack of insight referred to here. He accepts life as it is and regards things as real, just as they present themselves to him in experience. The first step, however, which we take beyond this standpoint can only be this, that we ask how thinking is related to percept. It makes no difference whether or not the percept, in the shape given to me, exists continuously before and after my forming a mental picture. If I want to assert anything whatever about it, I can only do so with the help of thinking. If I assert that the world is my mental picture, I have enunciated the result of an act of thinking, and if my thinking is not applicable to the world, then this result is false. Between a percept and every kind of assertion about it, there intervenes thinking," unquote.
Thinking does the legwork. Thinking is not skipping leg day.
You can't get anywhere without thinking. You're stuck having to deal with thinking as a fact of the universe.
So it's all too easy to find these mental grooves regarding our percepts and to make it into a functional method of interacting with the world. Of course, given the title of the book, the topic that we are truly unpacking here has to do with freedom. So we find ourselves digging necessarily into these philosophies as a means of discovering the functional root of free will as a universal principle. So once more, we find that thought is the universal principal actor, since the individual must utilize thought to form these percepts, as well as use it to probe liberally past the traps of these polar philosophies.
Or get anywhere at all.
It's a trap!
If we choose to follow the thread of free will and what it has to do with thought, we find that it connects deeply to the same free will that is utilized in shaping our percepts through thought. The two are interconnected.
All right, so you're Steiner, and you're in math class now, and I'm explaining to you what a parabola is. Why? Because it's about to come up. Actually, at Space Camp, we're launching rockets. You know why? Because rockets travel in the path of a parabola. In essence, a parabola is like a curve that goes up and then goes down like a mountain. So in rocketry, the top of the arch would be the apoapsis.
Isn't it a bit more complicated than that? Like it's a symmetrically mirrored curve. So if you have like, let's say you have a center point, which is the peak of your curve, then if you extend equal distance out on either side from that center point, they will be equal distance between the center point on each one.
Yes, so that's if you were to, chart it on a math graph, right? But I was just saying, rockets travel in parabolas. So in my concept of what a parabola is, there you have the idea of gravity, rocketry, time, prediction. Like there's all these different concepts linked together to a parabola that help us understand what it is. And so
I think a common one that's used for an example to visualize with is the curve of a banana.
I don't want to think about bananas.
Hey.
Yeah, isn't it just like when you throw a stone?
It's like if you threw a banana, it hits an uppermost point and then it falls back down. But if you were to like put a little tracker on it, it would look like, the bell curve meme. That's a parabola.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Or like how you see a rainbow, that curvature, that would be a parabola. Even though technically a rainbow's a full circle.
It's a circle. Thank you.
Yeah, it is. But what you see is a parabola.
Well, let's let Steiner explain it to us.
It's also a Tool song that has a really fascinating guitar solo in it that uses pitch harmonics in an innovative fashion. Damn it.
Can I go now?
Yep.
So I kind of like his explanation better though. Quote, I will make myself clearer by an example. If I throw a stone horizontally through the air, I perceive it in different places, one after the other. I connect these places so as to form a line. Mathematics teaches me to know various kinds of lines, one of which is the parabola. If I examine the conditions under which the stone is thrown by me moves, I find the path traversed is identical with the line I throw as a parabola. That the stone moves just in a parabola is a result of the given conditions and follows necessarily from them. The form of the parabola belongs to the whole phenomenon as much as any other feature of it does, unquote.
Okay, so we're thinking of a stone being thrown, and each moment of its movement is like an independent manifest reality. If you think of this like burst shot type photos, and you draw a line between each point, where the point is like the center of the stone, as it moves across its trajectory.
He continues on, quote, the spirit described above, who has no need of the detour of thinking, would find itself presented not only in a sequence of visual percepts at different points, but as part and parcel of these phenomena, also with the parabolic form of the path, which we add to the phenomenon only by thinking, unquote.
So he's saying that at no one moment does there actually exist a parabola. We must construct it conceptually using our thinking based on our observation, and thenceforth apply concept of parabola to the thing that we have observed, so that we may then unpack parabola to gain better understanding about what it is we just observed.
Yeah, because essentially it's a trajectory. You look at a parabola and you get all sorts of, like Luke, you're saying ideas of acceleration, gravity, air resistance. You're getting all of these ideas just from a simple curved line that can be defined by, these forces interacting with one another. But in each slice of reality, we're not seeing the whole of the experiment graphed on a chart of paper. That is the process of thinking.
He's also talking about how we have multitudes of concepts. So like we have the concept of the stone that we're familiar with, the concept of throwing, the concept of parabolas. All of these come together by thinking. And he's bringing this example up in order to further elucidate the connection between spirit and percept as well as the internal human experience and our external reality through thought.
Quote, it is not due to the objects that they are given us at first without the corresponding concepts, but to our mental organization. Our whole being functions in such a way that from every real thing, the relevant elements come to us from two sides, from perceiving and from thinking, unquote.
So, I may infer something about the origin of the stone because I know something about parabolas due to my mental organization. It would be impossible for me to do so without constantly perceiving and thinking to build up these perceptual maps.
He continues, quote, the way I am organized, apprehending the things, has nothing to do with the nature of the things themselves. The gap between perceiving and thinking exists only from the moment that I, as a spectator confront the things. Which elements do and which do not belong to the things cannot depend at all on the manner in which I obtain my knowledge of these elements. Man is a limited being. First of all, he is a being among other beings. His existence belongs to space and time. Thus, only a limited part of the total universe can be given him at any one time. This limited part, however, is linked up with other parts in all directions, both in time and space. If our existence were so linked up with the things that every occurrence in the world were at the same time also an occurrence in us, the distinction between ourselves and the things would not exist. But then there would be no separate things at all for us. All occurrences would pass continuously one into the other. The cosmos would be a unity and a whole, complete in itself. The stream of events would nowhere be interrupted. It is owing to our limitations that a thing appears to us as single and separate, when in truth it is not a separate thing at all. Nowhere, for example, is the single quality, quote, red, to be found by itself in isolation. It is surrounded on all sides by other qualities to which it belongs, and without which it could not subsist. For us, however, it is necessary to isolate certain sections of the world and to consider them by themselves. Our eye can grasp only single colors, one after another, out of a manifold totality of color, and our understanding can grasp only single concepts out of a connected conceptual system. Unquote.
You know what this reminds me of? We have this idea in magic that you have all these different bad things happening to you. And at first, they just seem like different bad things. But then the subjective feeling that they're all kind of connected starts to like rise up. And you're like, am I cursed? Have I pissed off a god or a spirit? Right? And so if you, let's say, check out Low-Milo Duquette's Low Magic, he explains how using the rose cross and a pendulum, a client came to him with a curse, and he used the pendulum to divine the name of a demon, which he used the name of the demon to encapsulate all the bad things that had happened, right? And so that's basically using and abusing this exact thing that Steiner is saying. Like,
oh, okay. So
well, he says specifically, it's all in your head. You just have no idea how big your head is. And this is totally in line with twisted wick theory, where, you know, we're talking on a cosmic level, where it appears to us as a single and separate, like the two ends of the twisted wick, but it's not separate at all.
Right, but acknowledging that, but Low-Milo Duquette was doing it in a tactful way in which you collect all of these separate instances of bad luck and you give it a name. You give it a place of or a source linking together.
So,
and by doing that and you're separating it from the totality of reality, right? You're separating it out, and therefore you can banish it at that point.
Right. And so he's abusing or using this quality that we use all the time. Like, we've brought it up on the show before, how in some cultures they didn't really have a word for blue because they had it sectioned off that part of the twisted wick and named it something specific. But Steiner's saying, like, we do this constantly with everything all the time.
Yes, that's just how our brain works.
I just want to touch on a part of this specifically for a second, because in this, he's referencing the natural quality of light as a quality of perception. So we know that light is reflected, absorbed, or transmitted when it interacts with objects. A red ball isn't red just because it's simply red. It's red because it interacts with the full spectrum of light, absorbing much of it and reflecting the red part of the spectrum. The red color of the ball that we see is that wavelength that's reflect back to our eyes.
In a sense, it's technically the wavelength that object don't mess with. You know, it's like, I'm not taking in that color. You take it. So it's like every color but that color is what that thing really is. So it's I'm confused. Sorry.
So this is an example given of the limiting nature of man as a being among beings. We can only perceive a fraction of the universe's totality at any given time according to our limitations. This does not mean that the universe is not whole or united, but it does imply a necessary division of sorts for perceptions to take place. In the example of the perception of colors, only one color is distinguished to us at a time as a seemingly separate thing, just as our thoughts appear to exist in singular manifestations and cannot be thought about while we're thinking about them.
We're living in a simulated reality. That's what it means. It's being simulated. You know what, though? In the occult tradition, when you're talking about all of it, like undivided, like all at once, all at unity, that's what what they mean when they say Pan, like the Night of Pan or the Vision of Pan. That's what they mean.
It means all that.
All
and
that.
a bag of chips.
And the bag of chips, such that all the bags and chipness are, it's all bag and chips and everything else all at once, unnamed.
Yes.
Yes.
Corn chips.
I'm hungry. In a greater sense, you've made the whole universe hungry. Did you thought about that?
Yes. Steiner continues, quote, "This separating off is a subjective act, which is due to the fact that we are not identical with the world process, but are a single being among other beings. The all-important thing now is to determine how the being that we ourselves are is related to the other entities."
Corn. We're corn.
This determination must be distinguished from merely becoming conscious of ourselves. For this latter self-awareness we depend on perceiving, just as we do for our awareness of any other thing. The naive man believes himself to be the creator of his concepts. Hence he believes that each person has his own concepts. It is a fundamental requirement of philosophic thinking that it should overcome this prejudice. The one uniform concept of triangle does not become a multiplicity because it is thought by many persons. For the thinking of the many is itself a unity, unquote.
A triangle is a fucking triangle, no matter who the is thinking about the triangle.
Yeah, like earlier I said, if you experience red and like you're going to call something red maybe that's a little bit orange to me, but we still both understand what red is as a pure concept or archetype of red.
Yeah, so there are universal concepts, and he's saying that no matter what personal application you put upon a concept, it's still a universal concept. And that, for me, that ties into Hermetic thinking as well, like universal principles, universal conceptual energies. And then we have these personal applications that we move around, twist around, apply to different things.
This is why I turned to the Platonic solids to begin my journey in magic, because for me, it was a good starting point because there are 5 Platonic solids. This is built into the conditions of our universe, that there are 5 and not 6 and not 4, and there can only be 5. And the reason there can only be 5 is inherently connected to the entire structure of all of reality. Because if there were 6, it would be different, but it's not. There's 5. I think that reflects the idea that, yeah, a dodecahedron is a dodecahedron no matter where it is. It's one idea. There's only one dodecahedron.
Yeah, there's a unified framework to concepts. So Steiner makes a point of saying that the only way to understand or know something's true nature is through a kind of investigative thinking. Concepts are bigger than the individual interpretation. And this is where we're kind of venturing into divine energies or egregore territories, where concepts exist as universal energetic principles, like I was saying before, and our personal percepts connect the dots for our personal relationships to those concepts to occur. And that's more universal than one might think at first. This also overlaps nicely with the ancient Egyptian perspective of Neteru, which a lot of people refer to simply as gods and goddesses. But these are energetic principles as concepts which permeate reality and may be observed through any number of objective means. We perceive these and develop personal connections that connect these into our own interpretations of those concepts. And we do that through thinking.
So just to borrow a popular one, Kek is the god of darkness, and darkness is one of these concepts. Sort of like, have you ever actually seen a 4? Is every 4 you've ever seen fundamentally different from another 4? If it was, would math even be possible? I don't think so. I think nobody's ever seen a 4, but the 4 we're thinking of, that's the only 4 there ever could be and ever was. Otherwise, it'd be another thing.
And this philosophy runs parallel to the general representation of Neteru that have conceptually creative energetic interactions. So for an example, you would have Thoth and Ma'at in ancient texts, and they conceptualize wisdom and truth or order. And these are things that are used in creative energetic interactions, but they themselves are concepts.
So Steiner says, quote, "Intuition is for thinking what observation is for percept. Intuition and observation are the sources of our knowledge," unquote.
Whoa. I think it's fun that intuition is coming up because that was my shoot from the hip idea of where freedom comes from.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you're not wrong. For me, this plays on the classic like energetic understanding of feminine and masculine, or receptive and active energetic principles. So intuition is a receptive principle which unites in thinking as an active principle to make it into a complementary whole. Observation is also a receptive principle where we take in the external reality or the data, and observation unites with the active principle of percepts, which would be activated by thinking, to transit and apply the information into whatever the thought is. So this complex unity of concepts as we relate personally to them are then united with these through thinking.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Our thinking is informed by our intuition. The way it's described is almost like our intuition is like the spark plug for our thoughts. And in this way, we receive our intuition, right? Whereas thought is more seen as something we do. Okay, so there's a bit of a balance there.
I like to think of this as like, so you know how when light goes through a prism, or even how light enters our eyes, it gets reversed, right? It gets refracted in an opposite manner.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like this. So like our percepts would be like that incoming light, so to speak. And then the intuition is like on the other side, like what's going on inside of us. So obviously we relate it to things like feelings and that kind of thing, but it's like a personal reflection, whereas the percepts are like an external data set.
Yeah.
So we've got an external data set and an internal data set.
I like to view it as like a filter on basically pure unadulterated observation, data coming in, and then our thinking and our intuition is the filter that it runs through in order to create the thought or concept.
Yeah, it's like a personalized relationship data set. So you've got the external data set coming in, which would be our percepts, and then we have our internal data set as our intuition.
And so our percepts, the things that we perceive, those are influenced or informed by our observation. Okay, got it.
Quote, thinking offers this content to the percept from man's world of concepts and ideas. In contrast to the content of percept, which is given to us from without, the content of thinking appears inwardly. The form in which this first makes its appearance we will call intuition, unquote. Getting into the good stuff.
But if you'd like to know more about the good stuff, including what exactly the intuition is, how thought is a bridge to the objective universe,
More parallel occult relationships,
including ancient Egyptian ones, I would assume,
and Hermeticism and Gnosticism,
and what it has to do with the idea of freedom on a fundamental level, then please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 will not only get you unlimited elite access to our entire library of extended episodes, along with this one you're listening to now, I'll send you a 5x5 high quality vinyl sticker for our Big Bunny Baphomet cover art, and you'll get the secret keys to our Discord server where you can tell us anytime, day or night, how confusing Rudolph Steiner was for you, because it certainly was
or
for me.
just yell freedom at us like Braveheart. That works too.
Freedom!
Thank you, everybody. Eat carrots and shoot lasers.
Pew pew pew.